the 8 core mentors at the Accelerator Center focusing on HR leadership and culture, and had the honor of working with Caitlyn when she had brought her organization through both Communitech and the Accelerator Center. I want to remind everybody that I know you're here for Caitlyn, and Caitlyn is, one of the most generous humans that I know in terms of giving back to the community. So please bring your full self to the conversation. Ask questions. Leanne's going to monitor to make sure that we don't miss. This is for you. This is for you. It's not for me in any way. So let's get started. So Caitlyn, first, just thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us. And will you give your version of an update on who you are? Like just a good introduction, who you are and what does Plum do?
Okay, so this has been quite a journey. I moved to Waterloo in 2013 because my 1-year-old startup had gotten into Communitech's Accelerator program. They gave us $40,000, and I had the year before been running a business in New Hampshire. The few months before moving to Waterloo, I was living in my mom's house with my 7-month-old and my husband, who's my co-founder. And then we got this opportunity, $40,000 to move to Waterloo and make this our home. And that was in 2013. So it's been a long journey since. We are now 32 employees. I've gone on to raise a $2 million angel round and a $5 million seed round and several $1 million of government grants and financing, including, thank you, the COVID money right now. And I've had iterations of the business. Most recently, we moved from talent acquisition, where we really were a pre-employment assessment. So instead of looking at a resume, for example, if you're a recent grad and you're applying for a job at Scotiabank, they don't take resumes anymore. Instead, you have to apply with your Plum profile. And it's a 25-minute assessment that tests for your transferable soft skills. We call them talents, like innovation, communication. Basically, it's quantifying your potential and how that can transfer to new opportunities. 2 years ago, we said, this market is super crowded. It's a spot solution. It's not strategic. It's low value. Half of our customers churn every year. This is a really tough battle. We're not going to be able to break through the crowd. Where else can we go that our competitors can't? And we saw an opportunity thanks to a woman who's now a board member. SAP had put $250,000 into our business as kind of a bridge before we raised our seed round. And Jenny Dearborn was the EVP of HR at the time. And she said, Caitlyn, that's great that you can help me with the 20 to 30,000 new hires every year. But what I really care about are the 90,000 employees at SAP. Can you help me with them? And organically, we were seeing some of our most prominent customers organically using us internally for their existing employees instead of for hiring. It was internal mobility, succession planning. So like any good entrepreneur, I said, of course we can help with internal talent management. And so it took me 2 years to raise that $5 million. I got over 100 no's. But then we spent the entire last year building a brand new product, repurposing a lot of pieces in our knowledge, but launching a new platform that is an end-to-end solution really focused on still hiring, but more importantly, talent management, and about 6 additional use cases, from internal mobility to identifying emerging leaders to succession planning to workforce planning, and really looking at how we use this data internally to optimize our existing people and team. COVID has been a mixed blessing. No one's hiring right now. So good thing we've moved out of just hiring. And it's sped up the need of enterprise companies to kind of realize how important their existing employees are and how can they repurpose and utilize them. We're 32 and we've been spending the last 2 years moving into enterprise, and the majority of our revenue comes from enterprise now. It's not usual that businesses of this size handle enterprise customers. Normally they wait until there are 70, 100 people. So we've had a lot of growing pains just trying to deal with enterprise and just also trying to kind of restart. You know, we've been in business for 9 years, our talent acquisition product in market for about just over 6, 7 years. And now it feels like we're starting over from day one, but we've got a bit more money in the bank and a bit more logos to give us credibility and a few more people to do it kind of a second time over. But it's interesting because a lot of we're trying to find product market fit right now, and hoping that this second iteration is going to be what allows us to break through in a very competitive HR tech environment. And we're trying to hit enough milestones to raise a Series A next year. I do not want to get another 100 no's like last time, and I don't have 2 years to make it happen. I'm a mom of 2, so I have a 5-year-old and 9-year-old. My husband is my co-founder, and he's director of product, so he's just on the executive team like everybody else. And we've gone through lots of kind of bumps over the years and a lot of growing pains, but I feel like we're finally where we're supposed to be and things are finally working. But it definitely feels like everything else with a startup, we're gambling, you know, we're playing the lottery and we're hoping that we're going to be the ones that win. And that's, you know, comes with lots of challenges that I'm 9 years of doing this. I'm used to a lot of them at this point.
One of the things that I love about you, Caitlyn, is your authenticity. Like, just, it's like, look, this is where we are. This is our third pivot. But you're getting good at the pivot's the overused word in our industry, of course, but welcome to business. I remember one of my favorite clients just going, Jackie, you know how many times I've pivoted in 40 years? It's part of the deal. So I love that you're so honest about the bumps that happen. They're just different bumps, or they look different. They could be larger or smaller 9, 10 years later. Can you share with us what is the biggest impact that COVID has had on Plum? And on you?
Yeah, I mean, I was traveling nonstop because of the fundraise, especially the year before, like most of 2019 up until us closing our round in the fall of 2019. But I would say, you know, from January through to September, I was on the road nonstop, and a good part of the year before. And it's really hard to run your business when you're fundraising because it's such a distraction. You can't be there to notice bottlenecks, to be supportive of the people around you. And for my family, you know, it's the great part of my husband being being my co-founder is that there's no resentment at home. If I'm doing something for the business and he's got to be over 50% a parent, there's no resentment, but it's still hard. It's hard on him, it's hard on the kids. And the biggest thing is that I have now had the ability to be present with my company and be there to support the people and the leaders in my company and really focus on the business without distraction, and to be home. Like I remember meeting a woman in the United States who was interested in maybe investing in us or introducing us to people. And she flat out said, hey, the most successful CEOs are on a plane all the time. You're in Canada, you're a mom, how am I going to believe that you can do what they do? And I felt this extra pressure to get, and I did at that point. I got on a plane more to build face-to-face relationships. And the best thing of COVID for me personally is that I've got to be present and I don't have to be pulled in so many different directions because I'm trying to fit in travel. And so I hope one of the long-term things is that I'll have to get on a plane again, but that being present for my team, being present for my family and for that I get to keep that has been really good. The other flip side of it though is that I do feel more burnt out than I think I ever have. And I think it's because, and I'm just guessing, but I was talking to another executive the other day, and the way that he was talking about something unrelated made me go, I think this is what's happening to me as well. So when we complete something, like let's say we had a target and we exceed that target, it's a huge rush of adrenaline. We feel like we've done a fantastic job. And that's sometimes a problem that we have as leaders, you know, letting go of that we're the ones completing things because we're not getting that adrenaline rush. But the flip side of it is that in COVID, when we start really missing targets because everyone stopped buying, in our case, everyone stopped hiring. When we start having these challenges that were brought on by COVID and are totally normal, it means that we're getting the opposite of these adrenaline rushes. We're feeling that the signal is we're missing our targets, something's wrong, something's spiraling, we're in failure mode, and there's this reaction as leaders where we want to step up and we end up over rotating. You know, if we got to 8 hours a day, and that, you know, for me, I've been well out of the sprint mode and into the marathon mode for years, especially with 2 kids. I really think about things as a marathon. With COVID, because we were missing everything, I think that I jumped in to the sprint mode of, okay, what can I do to help make sure the team has a win? What can I do to, you know, support another leader who's burnt out and isn't necessarily hitting their target? How do I keep everybody motivated with that extra oomph? And I think, you know, we launched the new product 8 weeks ago. There was a lot of heavy lifting that we needed to do to get the product out in a short period of time. And I stepped up as an individual contributor, as well as all of my other responsibilities. And I'm just friggin' burnt out. And I think it's because I was trying to make up for the gap that COVID has created in terms of just performance, our ability to hit these metrics of success. So yeah, COVID's really burnt me out. And then if I'm feeling burnt out, I recognize that everybody else is too. So there's some very specific things that we're conscious of right now related to COVID that may be helpful to share with others as you think about winding down the year. One, we at US Thanksgiving, we gave a day off and called it a Plum self-care day and encouraged everybody to take the Thursday off as a holiday. We all know that just trying to get to even like the 2-week mandatory holiday that people are needed to have by law, like this was hard to get people to take vacation this last year. But like we're specifically trying to offer, so the first week before Christmas, we always shut down Christmas to New Year's, but there's 4 days before Christmas. So we are offering 2 of those days as Plum self-care days, and then really encouraging people to take the 2 days as holidays so that it's kind of half and half. So we're giving between US Thanksgiving and New Year's, in addition to our shutdown before Christmas and New Year's, 3 Plum self-care days, and then 3 days where we shut down the office and told people to take it as their holidays. And that's been really important. So we'll have 2 uninterrupted weeks of vacation. The other thing is we just lost a developer that got poached with a salary that we cannot compete with. And one of the things that we're realizing is that with remote work, US firms can be hiring our Canadian talent at a much higher salary, and it's nothing for them. And so that's more relevant than ever. So we're a little worried about going into the holiday season, having 2 weeks for people to kind of poke around or, you know, entertain outreach from recruiters. And so we're really focused on, are people excited about their career journey and the company's trajectory come January? So we just had a town hall right before this, which is why I have this background. And, you know, we did kind of they called it, this is my executive team that asked me to do this, but they called it Caitlyn's Chronicles or Holiday Chronicles or whatever. And I kind of did a recap of like, what are the things that we should be super proud of that we've accomplished this year? And what are we really excited about, you know, and want people to be rejuvenated and rested and hit the ground running for January because we've got these great things happening. And it's like bullets that they can go back to their family with over the holidays to talk about how great their job is and their company, to just keep them extra engaged. We are doing next week a drive-by drop off. I think we're spending $25. No, I think in the end it was $30 per employee to put a little like care kit together with the theme of self-care. And they're going to drive by and pick up the, you know, pick up their little gift and be able to like wave and say hi, socially distancing outside, just so that they have that human connection before the holidays. So we're thinking a lot about people's burnout. We're thinking a lot about people's engagement. We're thinking a lot about not wanting to lose anybody over the holidays to poachers. And how do we just make sure that that's the focus of our conversations. It's not about like, are you hitting your like targets on your to-do list and like, how are you performing? Instead, it's like, how do we make sure that you know that you're valuable and that you have stuff to be excited about with the company? So that's a big part of COVID is it's really shifted the focus to how do we keep making it about supporting the employees and not about worrying to the extent of like, yeah, but where's productivity and accountability? Like that's not the conversation. The conversation is about how do we support people and give them what they need.
You know, I think about the top 2 things that I've noticed from coaching executives one-on-one or working with leadership teams has been for me in my business, resiliency and empathy, compassion. And so let's talk about resiliency. So how have you shown resiliency, learned about your own resiliency and maybe helped your team with it?
My team loves, you said it at the top of the call, just the authentic component of leadership is like, I've been flat out, like I'm burnt out, I'm exhausted. And if I feel this way, I bet you feel this way too. So just permission for us to be honest about how everything's weighing. You know, to share the vulnerable moments. We're a big fan of Brené Brown and Dare to Lead, and the importance of, you know, if we want to be courageous and take risks, then we first have to admit that we're scared and that it's hard, and, you know, kind of be vulnerable first. And so big part of it is that when we want people to, you know, I remember having calls with investors a year ago, and if I, let's say, was taking it at home, and because my kid was sick and one of my kids would come on screen, there was this, like, on the other side of Zoom, somebody apologizing, like, oh, I'm sorry I'm interrupting your life. And, oh, like, you need to reschedule. Like, it was almost this, they were apologizing on my behalf because my personal life kind of came in. But with COVID, it's like, no, it's totally normal for kids to pop up in the background and nobody's apologizing. And it's like, we really are allowed to bring our whole selves to work. So part of it has been showing my whole self. It's been normalizing. One of the very first things that we did was create a schedule, because all the kids were at home and nobody had school. We created a schedule for parents. We literally did like blocks of time and had recess. And my one employee who doesn't have kids, he would tell his friends, I'm working for an employer that has mandatory recess time. It's great. And like, we tried to kind of lean into how do we support the parents that make up 50% of our organization, as well as the individuals. How do we make sure there's blocks of time so that people can go out and go for a walk? And we've kind of taken that approach to everything, which is how do we respect that people are juggling a lot of things at once and have a lot of different needs, and how do we try to, instead of ignoring that or expecting people to leave it outside their home office door, how do we make space for that and celebrate and commiserate on all the different pieces of it. So I think part of the resilience is not trying to compartmentalize like we used to, and leading by example, that by sharing what's going on and the hardships and the advantages too, you know, the things that we find. So if we find a person that's making masks, you know, and that helped outfit our, you know, family, share that resource. If we, you know, are using a dinner service, like share that resource. So a lot of also of kind of normalizing that we don't, none of us do it alone. We have different hacks and different things, and that's part of kind of getting through it. And it being difficult too is just exposing all the facets of life from a place of leadership allows everybody else to feel like they can bring all of that to the table too.
I hear it. I hear it. First of all, I want to acknowledge some of the comments that were made. Tabitha's like, she's writing, amazing. Thank you, Caitlyn. That sounds like a mission-based culture, right? Just going out and serving the community and serving each other. And then John, of course, that sounds incredible. John, I think that was related to the time, like time off for family and parents, yeah?
Yeah, recess and understanding that there's different challenges with children and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So before I dig in, steal more thunder, questions from you guys for Caitlyn.
Yeah, I have a question, Caitlyn. One thing that I think there's a lot of focus on is how to help parents who are working from home with COVID. Have you guys done anything to help any employees that you have that maybe live alone and are feeling really isolated right now? And how do you manage those employees?
Yeah, we worry a lot about the ones that are completely by themselves. It's a big part of the conversation. So we make sure that there's one-on-ones. Every single person has a one-on-one weekly, if not, sometimes it's like once every other week, but most of them it's once a week with their manager. We also have a director of people and culture who also checks in. And then I have quarterly, or I would say it's more like every 4 months at this point. I still have one-on-ones with everybody as well. Different purposes, but most of them really follow. There's a podcast on one-on-ones. I can't think of the exact name of it right now, but it talks about the reason why you have the one-on-ones, again, isn't about accountability. It's about building the relationship. It's so that when things are tough, there isn't this big barrier they have to overcome to be able to share what's going on. If they're naturally having a relationship of talking to you once a week, if things are hard, it'll naturally come up. So they're there to be support and to hear about that and to check in on how somebody's doing. We've done a few things like we've had kind of different care packages and things that we've dropped off throughout the time. And so we make sure that, you know, the ops team will often have 5 people and they go and drop off stuff. And that might be a half an hour chat in person, like a 15-minute chat in person outside every few months, just some human connection. We've had like different things where people have like met outside. I think they did, what is it called? Disc golf. Like the developers out of all groups have had the hardest time working remotely because they're so used to getting feedback from each other all the time. And a lot of them live alone. So it's been one of the groups that we've been worried. It's like they don't necessarily have the social skills to figure out how to bridge the gap and find those social interactions without work kind of providing it. So, like they just did disc golf outside as a team just to give some in-person interaction. So I think we're realizing that we use town halls. I would say every other week we have a town hall, and I would say every other town hall we do some sort of activity. So we just tried a game called Icebreaker. It's a platform, and we just used it today for town hall, and I used it for an executive virtual offsite. It's called, oh, where is it? It's not here, of course. Anyway, it's like Icebreaker .video or something. I will find it before we are done and let you know. And so it randomly pairs people and has them ask questions. And so we make sure that we carve out time to really work on the relationships and really work on the interactions. Like, it's not just about getting down to business and what do we need to tell you. It's like, let's use this time together to foster interaction so that people don't feel super alone. How do we, one of our employees, so she moved to this area from Quebec for her boyfriend who got a job in Stratford. COVID hit, they broke up, and she was kind of on her own, completely solo in Waterloo, isolated. And so she asked for permission to move back to Montreal, you know, temporarily, because she could be around friends and have a better environment. And we've just agreed that she's such an amazing asset. She can stay in Quebec. Like, it's fine because she's supported there. We've had other people that have moved back home. And so one of the things has just been to really check, like, where is their support system? Is there anything we can do to help them? One of our employees just had to go back to Brazil for several months because his wife needs to give a kidney to her brother and a kidney transplant. So it's also being as flexible as possible. I remember a year ago, I told my executive team that one of our jobs as executives is to create psychological safety for our employees. You're never going to be able to have your employees perform at a higher level if they're just not in a great place to begin with, if they're constantly on edge, walking on eggshells, things like that. And I know that my team at the time looked at me like I was completely crazy. I'm jumping ahead to some of the questions later, but I also talked about it's our jobs as executives to lead from a place of love and care. I got these crazy looks from my head of engineering, my head of sales. You know, these people are like, what are you talking about? But what's been great with COVID is, of course, it's our job to provide psychological safety and physical safety. Of course, it's our job to be supportive leaders. This all makes sense now. But a year ago, I took them through the Brené Brown Dare to Lead training so that a PhD expert could tell them that it was needed and they would believe that, because of course they weren't going to necessarily believe it straight from me. But it is to the point now where we do worry a lot about those people that are by themselves, and we check in a lot around their safety. I remember in the spring, our director of people and culture is connected with the senior HR leaders in town, and there was a scare at one of the companies where they had an employee on suicide watch, and there was a time period where they couldn't get a hold of them, and like, we were on it, realizing how real that is, and how we as employers need to be checking in to make sure our people are safe and have what they need to stay safe, and just everything we can do to check in on that one-on-one to really understand what they need in order to thrive.
Mm. Thank you, Caitlyn. I mentioned that the two things that have come to me since COVID is more work around empathy and compassion. And I think I shared this story with you. I have one CEO who literally abdicated his throne, for lack of a better phrase. And he said, I'm not the right leader during this pandemic. It needs to go to somebody who has the compassion and the empathy in ways that I don't. And he succeeded his role to a COO. And it's still the case, and they've never regretted it. It was unreal. And I've noticed that a lot of the training and the coaching has come to me about, please help us. We clearly need to have more compassion and empathy. So, and I hear your words around leading with love. So can you talk to us a little bit about, I know this is something you believe to be true, but now deeply we have a shared experience about why. Can you tell us more about those beliefs as you lead?
Yeah, so this has been my own personal journey. When I started working, I studied international development at the University of Guelph. So I would say in hindsight, I did want a job where I was going to make a difference, but I was really disillusioned in university. I was really disillusioned when I went on an exchange to Ghana and West Africa, and kind of came back being like, I need to make a difference in my own backyard. I have colleagues that are going to make a better difference in Ghana if they are part of the UN or whatever it was. So I let go of that part of my wanting to do good, I guess, as part of when I finished university. I went to teach English in China for a year, realized I am not a teacher. That did not fill my bucket. And then when I came back, I got hired to start up a social enterprise from scratch. I was the first employee, director of operations, and I got to build an entire sweatshop-free, locally made organic apparel company. And basically, I became an expert in supply chain management and manufacturing and things that I really didn't, have any experience with. But what happened is that my boss he was raised by a mom who was a doctor and a single mom. And he basically was around part-time. He handled sales and finance and just let me build the business from scratch. And that's when I learned that I was an entrepreneur. But I think there was something in me where at that point, I felt like whatever was going on in my personal life or who I was with my friends and my family, that all got left at home. When we used to go into the office every day, and I would come to the office, and it was about how much had I built from scratch, how much had I executed on, how was I proving that I deserved the right to be growing this business and to basically mold it from nothing into something. I very much felt like that old idea of like, you don't cry at the office. That's not, you leave that stuff at home. And so early, the first 3 years, like I turned into a massive workaholic where I was at work 12 hours a day. I had the crackberry. I was constantly on the BlackBerry responding to things. And I progressed in my career and I built successful things. And so something in me, by the age of 27 was set that my job was defined by how well I was hustling and how well I was executing. And that's how I was going to accomplish things in the world. And as I progressed, I ended up becoming the US president of a Canadian educational writing software company that wanted to start a US branch, and that continued. But what happened, and I had seen an executive coach throughout this journey, trying to figure out how to be less agreeable and how to push back and say no and create boundaries, but didn't really get to the heart of this issue of where I was putting my sense of self-worth. And then 4 years ago, I started seeing this executive coach in San Francisco, but he was originally from Germany. And whatever reason, his background in executive coaching was just from a very, very different place. And he was the one that said, my job as CEO is to lead from a place of love and care. And I remember a year ago, I was so excited because there was this massive German business magazine, and on the cover was that the new future of business leadership was leading from a place of love. And the fact that a German business magazine was declaring this kind of validated his whole life work. But it took me a long, long time, 3.5 years of coaching, where my interactions with people stopped being transactional, where I'm just checking off like, what do I need to accomplish? by talking to you? What is the reason that I'm talking to you? What's the thing that I need from you to move things to the next place? It was all about that to-do list and checking it off. And from being able to put down that transactional part of the engagement to really focusing on the relationship. How does every interaction be relational? Because if I have a genuine, real relationship with you, we're going to accomplish way more together than whatever was going to be on that to-do list. And recognizing that investors, they are not investing in growth metrics or this or that, or they love the business. They are investing in you and the fact that they trust you and see something in you and the relationship with you. And so, same thing with your employees. Like, they're going to want to stay working at your company because they respect the leadership and the direction, and they'd rather work for you than a tyrant elsewhere. And so just recognizing that, I, as a human being, I have a small group of best friends, and I'm an amazing best friend with them, and I'm all relational. I don't need anything from them. I just want that relationship. With my kids, relational. With my family, relational. But when I would come to work, that entire part of me was left at home. And it took me 3.5 years to undo that, so that I was really bringing the relationship side to work and being relational. And I'm still working on it. I'm still not there. It's still a journey, but I at least understand what it's meant to my job really is to foster ownership and alignment from other people, to make sure that they're supported, and to make sure that, I don't go around trying to claim that we're a family with unconditional love and no one would ever get fired. It's not that far, but I genuinely, want people to thrive and be set up for success. And I will do everything I can to honor who they are and what they need in order to be fully supported and to be a human being when leading them. And it's about, how do you honor the full human being? And that starts with leading from that place of love and care, and really getting that across first. Because if we can do that first, everything else follows from there. But it's been a long journey, and I don't know why I, compartmentalized a strength that I naturally had to the point where it was completely a weakness in business. And I'm having to, it's like a muscle. I had to practice using it in work and figuring out how to make it. And I would say I'm still growing that muscle of how to make sure it comes through first.
I have a judgment and a commentary, as it doesn't help in business that women are taught to put aside the nurturing, compassionate, and loving side, and that we're supposed to learn to be transactional. So it's a programming we learned quite young. That's my excuse for you, and I'm sticking to it because I relate wholeheartedly. I could cry too, because my work is around the neuroscience of trust, and that's where innovation and productivity come from. So I'm feeling grateful that you're underscoring some of the things that I talk about, and some of my clients are on the call today. So there's about 3 different lines. I was like, whoo, she's saying some of the same things. I watched everyone nodding as you're talking, so I want to make sure that we're opening the floor to other questions and comments.
I just want to respond before they jump in. Jackie's been telling me this stuff for 9 years. I just feel like I'm finally hearing it. You've always known. I was just too much of an idiot to understand what it meant in full practice. I always valued it. I always, really, really thought that you offered so much value and expertise, and how grateful I've always had to have you in my network, and to have your help throughout all the years that we were physically at, in the AC program as well. I just feel like I'm finally waking up to stuff that you've always been saying. And I think that COVID has made it very, very clear. The days of command and control are over.
They are.
If you want to be a successful business, this is how you lead. And the leaders that are at the forefront of it, we're going to be the ones that are going to be successful long-term. Everybody else will be left behind. So I think, Jackie, you were just way ahead of the curve. And now, thanks to COVID, we're catching up.
So it's sad but true. One of the gifts of COVID is that shared experience that we're having worldwide, and understanding that's critical. Comments or questions for Caitlyn?
I've got one, if that's okay. Even though
Absolutely.
it's okay. So Caitlyn, you touched upon something that is absolutely something that we're experiencing at the AC, and that's the holistic view that everything is seen under, because nothing's happening in a vacuum right now. Everyone's at home while they're working, so there's no separation. We've been surveying clients and staff on a regular basis to see how they're doing and how we can better support them. And in the last survey for staff, and of course some are here, but it won't be a surprise what was said. We specifically asked them how they're doing personally, but also how they're doing professionally. And we got a lot of comments about, AC's been great, very supported, we have what we need. Personally, I'm not doing so well. Burnt out, anxious, frustrated, and all the things that are not a surprise to anyone. So I think one of the things that at this point really lacking on my end is creativity on how to help with that, because you touched on a couple of great examples where it's like, oh geez, like we hadn't thought of that before. You got any other nuggets there and how we can better support that? I mean, right now we're really just being aware of it and being mindful of it, but I can't think of anything that we can really do. And maybe that's just a reflection of the time that we're in, where the creativity is just nuked.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all need a break, like it's really encouraging. Like I said, when we feel like we're missing targets, or we feel like we're not succeeding to the level we're supposed to, the default is, well, we have to do more. If we're not achieving, then we have to do more. And so it starts with a very, very clear message, giving leaders permission that actually they have to lead. Like we do this all the time. As a leader, you have to lead by example. If you want your people to step away from their computers for 2 weeks, then you have to step away from your computer for 2 weeks first. And it's your responsibility as a leader to enforce those boundaries so that you lead by example. So, the AC can lead by example in really, really, really stressing why people need to take the next, 2 weeks off, by talking about how to maybe phrase it between self-care days and potential vacation days, like how to give them, you can even do like a theme of like the 12 days of self-care, and like maybe even make a little fun calendar of like different things that people can do for self-care, just to drive home. Do not work. Do not check your email, because your productivity come January will be so different. If you just rest for 2 weeks, you can hit the ground running and run faster than ever. But if you do a little trickle of work during that 2 weeks, and it's so hard, like we have all these markers of what success looks like. So it's reprogramming. So the AC, I think, can really lead by reprogramming what success over the holidays looks like. Mm-hmm. The other thing is like, the other thing is professional development. I think that we can't afford it, to be honest, but there's some different experts out there that have tips on how to make sure before you get sick, you avoid being sick. Like, what are the things to be mindful of? Just a reminder of, sleep hygiene and best practices around getting enough sleep. Even just reminder that it's really not about going to the gym anymore. The big best practice is just movement. Okay, but how much movement? And is it really steps right now? Because like you can go and do less than 3,000 steps in a day very easily. So are we really trying to get to 10,000 steps? Or are we trying to do like, hey, 30 minutes of like doing laundry and putting out dishes is moving your body, and like renormalizing what self-care looks like? And there's lots of experts that'll come in and talk about that as a refresh. But the other thing is then sharing, part of what I'd love, there's 14 minutes left, like come off of mute, put on your video, like if you don't mind it's being recorded, but like just sharing that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one feeling this way. It's not just me, which I think is important for leadership, because they can't always say it as much as they'd like to everybody else, because you don't want to be judged. You don't want, like, I've had this conversation in other elements where like sometimes in the community, by being vulnerable, it's come back to hurt me, because when somebody's rank ordering who are the most successful companies in town, if they think we're not doing so well, then we don't get offered the limelight of being showcased what success looks like. So sometimes it's hard for leaders to take the showmanship hat off and just be like, yeah, I'm sure the business is fine, but like, it's just, I need to vent that I'm not great, and getting others in a safe environment to just also share. And then to, you know, share any tips or tricks that may be a hack that they're using at home to lighten the load, or a reminder of maybe what they might be doing over the holidays. So they'll be like, oh, that's a really good idea. I didn't think about, maybe I can go outdoor skiing, you know, that's safe and socially distancing. Oh, you can go there to do cross-country skiing. Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe that's something I can look into.
Exactly. One of the words that the clients at the AC probably get tired of hearing me use is alignment. I always say my job and your job as a leader is to ensure alignment. So I heard you use the words recently. I was like, oh, I totally get it. Can you talk to us about your beliefs around accountability versus alignment?
Yeah. So I really saw my role before, and I would say probably up until 2 years ago, my role was really to be a fixer. I'm the CEO, so when you have a problem, come to me and I'll fix it. And I see myself and get a sense of self-worth by being the fixer. And, you know, accountability was really about, are you doing what you said you were going to do? And if not, what's in the way and how can I help you fix it? And that's kind of how I saw leadership. And when we had to make difficult decisions, well, it's okay, because that's a difficult decision you need to make. Somebody's either not being accountable or not accomplishing what they're doing. And so we need to make a change. And my job is to make those tough decisions. And that's kind of the scope of, like, other than fundraising, being a CEO. And it's really messed up, because the only way that you can accomplish your company objectives, your company goals, is if everyone is rowing together in the same direction. And if people really have full ownership that that's what they want to accomplish. You know, nobody is going to do something just because it's a target there. They have to want to do it. And how hard they try and what they do is based on how valuable they think that's a good use of their time, and how valuable they think that's a priority over something else. And so if you really want to get the best of people and you want to get the best performance at a company level, then you need people to fully own it. And people don't own things unless they were part of creating it, and unless they were part of designing it, and they were part of, you know, agreeing that that was the most important thing. And so I've really seen my job shifting as, my job is to create incredibly high ownership, all the way from executives down to individual contributors. And part of that high ownership is we can't be owning going in lots of different directions. We need to be acting as one team. And that literally has been a goal of mine for the last 3 years, of getting the company to work as one team. And part of my Caitlyn's Chronicles, whatever, recap was, we actually are operating as one team. The silos have gone away. The pointing fingers have gone away. The I can't do my job because I'm not getting support from that person has gone away. And we're seeing how we can accomplish what the company needs holistically. How, you know, when there's a problem, people are putting their hands up saying, I can help fix that, or I can come in and support. Like, people, instead of like, I don't have time and I can't support you, or I won't be able to hit my objective. Now it's like, how do we solve it together? Everything is about, we've committed collectively on these collective goals, regardless of department. Now, how can we get it done? And that's where it starts to trickle from company down into department, down to individual contributors. But it starts with, what together have we decided that we want to accomplish? And that starts with ownership and alignment. You want to be aligned that we're seeing that end point, that North Star, or that goal a year from now or a quarter from now, that we're seeing it from the same perspective, and that we got to that same perspective through collaboration. And so I really, really focus on, when I think about how do you collaborate, well, it's really hard with accountability. It's like, well, you know, is it my responsibility or your responsibility? Because the second the accountability is on a single person, you're not collaborating anymore. So to get that high level of ownership and alignment, collaboration is a key component to that. So I find that accountability is really tough in that collaborative environment. What I realized literally on Tuesday, so yesterday, was that I use a feedback mechanism instead of an accountability mechanism. And what that means is that on a monthly basis, as a leadership team, we're checking in red, yellow, green on how we are tracking to our quarterly company goals. Most people will do, well, are you at 80% completion of that goal? Or are you at 70%? Or, you know, red, yellow, green about how's it going? No, I'm using red, yellow, green to be like, hey, how do you think, you may not know anything about that API integration, but we agreed as an executive team that that was what we were going to get done this quarter. How do you think it's going? And people get to say, well, I think it's on track, or I think it's in danger, or it is in danger. And we just get to have a discussion where frankly, it's a feedback loop of, are we on track? And hearing from each people and seeing if we're aligned to believing we're on track or not. And what it shows us is if we're off track, if we're on track, what areas we need to spend more energy on and where areas we don't need to worry about. And it isn't about finger pointing and how are you doing? It's about collectively, are we aligned on how we're tracking to these goals? And it's surfacing and using that feedback to align around how the progress is going, rather than tracking, did you check off that thing yet? Are you at 100% completion? So I think feedback is a better mechanism that leads to collective ownership of goals.
And you've done Dare to Lead. So when you're doing feedback, you can learn to rumble to make sure there's alignment, right? Which is really, really good. You would love, I'll have to share it with you. My mentor, Judith Glaser, was a world-renowned neuroscientist, and she talked about accountability creates an us versus them. It's more about I and you. And when you're in that place, it's hard to actually build connection and collaboration. And when she has something called a conversational dashboard, when you can get to the place of we, like alignment, like you've done with your team, you actually move from collaboration to co-creation, right? And that's what you're doing when you start to rumble with each other. So well done. Such a great story for everyone. Here, I want to ask you this. What advice do you have for young Caitlyn? What would you like to say to her?
I mean, the relational piece, man, I wish I started that journey because I felt like I built up years of a wall that I then took years to break down. And if I could have gone back to me before those bad habits were in place, boy, would that have shortened the learning curve. That muscle wouldn't have gone into atrophy and then have to be built back up. So I really wish that part. I'd love like any books or resources, this part that feedback, how it replaces accountability is something very new. And it's my personal professional development goal for 2021 is to work on feedback. My Plum profile says that under stress, I'm not always great with feedback. And I decided that's the next thing I'm going to work on. So any insights or thoughts about feedback and changing the accountability conversation, I'd love to be pointed in the right direction. I feel like if I had understood how to handle and deliver and use feedback as in my toolkit earlier, that would have helped too. You know, I think the thing I can say that it is true, and I don't know if I needed to hear it then, but it's definitely the thing I would tell myself is like, we hear a lot in the startup world, and there's this kind of myth that it takes 3 to 5 years to get to success. And, you know, if you're not successful in 5 years, maybe you should consider stopping. Maybe you should consider quitting. Maybe you're not successful. Maybe you're a zombie and you just need to bow out. And I have seen repeatedly, and I hope I'm one of these examples, often the first product in market is just you learning what the real problem is for you to then go and solve. And so I feel like sometimes the first few years, the first iteration, you know, is just what you need to do to get to the second product, the second iteration, and that's where you're successful. And I see it with Vidyard, you know, some of the new free tool that they launched, you know, a couple of years ago is really the foundation of what their business is now. You know, we've seen it with lots of different companies. If you look closely at town, you know, where they started and where we see the beacon of success, that's not where they started at all. And so we need to recognize that takes time. That the inventor of Siri, it took 15 years before Siri got bought by Apple. So I always have this thing where that part of resilience, like, there's so many mixed messages in our industry about what success looks like and how long it should take. And a lot of the times, like, the metrics are based on people that have a really amazing network. Maybe they're second-time founders and they were able to hit the ground running with all the connections and get a boatload of money and go from A to B very, very quickly. But the second you don't have that money, the second you don't have that staff, the second you don't have that network, all the metrics are completely different. And so it's really, really hard sometimes. And I still have to remind myself to, you know, we always see these examples of success and go, oh, they're so much more successful than me. And it's not helpful for anyone, like, especially yourself. So just know that most of the metrics out there are bullshit. But the one thing that is true is relationships. Relationships will always, always help. And so get really, really, really damn good at building relationships. They'll go much, much further than a lot of the other things that we're told to do as founders and executives. And, you know, to get good at, I'd say just get good at building relationships, authentic, genuine relationships.
I want to just do a mic drop and like hang up now, because that's a really like great place to end. What I love about that, Caitlyn, because we live in the tech world, you and I'm always astounded that leaders have not created psychological safety for people to innovate. It's like, we're an innovator. Well, not really, because if you haven't built trusting relationship where people can share their innovative ideas, it's not eventually going to be an innovative place to be. And I always find that so ironic, right? Just love it.
We're not always great as a community even at supporting each other and creating that safety.
Right.
I said sometimes, like, if we come out a little too weak, then we get, oh, well, they're on the downward. They're not going to be successful. I'm not going to help them out because they're on their way out anyway. And it's like, we don't always do as best as we could in our own peer group at creating that space for more innovation in our community and more support. So we have it in our own four walls, but we have the work to do in our community and work to do to the community outside of tech that doesn't even realize how amazing we are and that they can be a part of it.
So true. Let's give last word to some of the folks in the call. Other questions or comments you'd like to make?
I'll ask one. Caitlyn, it's nice to meet you and thanks so much for doing this. I'm curious about whether you've had to do any virtual onboarding within your own team and how that has been going.
Yeah, lots. So we went from 20 people to 32 this past year, and the vast majority of them were post-COVID. What we have found is to be explicit with like a 60-day onboarding plan. So specifically have a calendar of what are they doing at each time and share that with them so they know what to expect, what conversations to have, and really utilize the entire organization. So, you know, our director of product, who's my co-founder, gives the history of Plum. That's one of the meetings. Our office manager will do like another specific meeting. So you can get different kind of checklists of best practices of information to cover. It's really just about taking it the next step to like put it in a calendar and document it so that it's reliable, that it's the ambiguity of I don't know when this is going to get covered that's so hard for people. But the second they're like, oh, I'm going to have that conversation next Friday, I don't need to worry about that. Or it also makes people feel like they don't have to figure it out. It's been thought out for them. So we are praised for having an incredible virtual onboarding process. And it's just because we've gotten as explicit as possible with what are each steps. What do they need to review on day one? What are the expectations of day two? What are the expectations of day three? And it's just putting in the time to document it and solidify it.
Great question, Carly. Got anything else brewing in there we can look at for you? Good. And Leanne, any other final words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, if no one else has any more questions, I just want to thank you, Caitlyn, for coming and having such wonderful conversation with us and providing your insights. I know this is kind of stuff that people are really hungry to hear right now because everyone's feeling that burnout and feeling that they're just over COVID in general. So that was, I'm sure, really inspiring and really helpful for everyone on the call. And thank you, Jackie, as always, for providing such great conversation and asking such wonderful questions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Caitlyn, for your generosity of spirit and time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's lovely to talk to all of you. I hope you enjoy your holiday rest.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.